out that Ben Yoir, Ben Shimi, these are all expressions indicating the level having to do with davening. And we asked, what is Mordechai, who's the Rosh Sanhedrin, who actually symbolizes the idea of Torah, what does it have to do with the concept of davening? So for that, he explained beforehand we need to understand what's the concept of the difference between bracha and haidah. That we explained that bracha is amshachem malmaila, that comes down begilui, tailored according to everyone, like a malakalam. That's the same idea, like Torah. Torah comes down into each person accordingly, according to their understanding. Tefillah is like the idea of haidah, the level of soivuklam. It's a bittul to something higher, something greater than us, and that's the idea of the two types of levels. Brachas amshachim b'mayil lamata, that comes misachid with the person, like Torah. Haidah is the idea of bittul. I'm moida, I accept something that's beyond my understanding. It's completely nullifying myself. That's the idea of tefillah. And now that we know that bracha and tefillah is the idea, or Torah and tefillah is bracha and haidah, achdus versus bittul. So now we can explain it back to the pasuk of Ish Yehudi that we explained. Like the Yehudi begins off with haidah, right? Ish Yehudi, and then from that it goes Ben Yoir, Ben Shimi, Ben Kish. That this all goes on expressions of davening. So again, page 6, line 22, page Yud Ois Hey. Zehu each Yehudi haya b'Shushan Abira. This word means that there was each Yehudi in Shushan Abira, Shmai Mordechai ben Yair Goim, and his name was Mordechai, the son of Yair, etc. So first of all, right away at the beginning of the pasuk, before we even get into the meaning that the Chazal said ben Yair, that he illuminated the eyes of Yidden with his davening, and that he knocked on the gates of heaven, and that he and then he had Hashem listen to his tefillah. Even beforehand, the first thing that it says, Ish Yehudi. He's an Ish Yehudi. What's the idea of Yehudi? Well, Shem Inyan Haidah, it's called Yehudi because of his admitting and accepting. That's the idea of davening, like we mentioned earlier in Ois Beis, that the idea of Haidah is the idea of davening because he is a state of elevating himself. It's not about him, it's not about the Hamshacha, it's coming to him, it's about the bittul to something higher. Now, in davening itself, the haidah component of davening, we find two levels of haidah in davening. So he says in line 25, and this itself, there are two levels. One of them is haidah the moedah biyad bekumim b'shnasa. One is the haidah of moedah ani immediately when he gets up from his sleep in the morning. And the second type of haidah, Haidah, the Moedim Shabbasoifat Tefillah, the Haidah that we say in Shemoneh Esrei, Moedim Anachnu Loch, that's at the end of davening, Achrei Haizbonus Chulu, after the meditation, etc. Behind with this meets. So in other words, it's like, if you will, it's bookended. Before, at the beginning, we start off with Haidah, and then we have all the different types of levels of Hizbonus and all different types of levels of Ava, Yira, and asking for our needs and so on. And then we conclude with Haidah. So we start with Bittul and we conclude with Bittul. Behind this means Shel Mordechai, top of page Yiralf, Hoysa Binyan Torah, though the main advantage of Mordechai wasn't the idea of Torah. He also had the advantage and the quality of Bittul and Haidah that's to be found in davening. The Indians of Paul Gamal Asaga Torah, and this bittul and haidah that he had in davening also influenced his comprehension in Torah. That through that become also a raising up and a lifting up in Mordechai's Torah and in Mordechai's wisdom. This is what Esther told him. That when it says that Mordechai and Esther had a conversation, that Esther told Mordechai, as we see in the Megillah, fast 3 days. Now we know that this whole story with the Suda and so on took place right in close proximity to Pesach. the 3 days would come out, that they would fast, on Pesach would come out one of those 3 days, during Yom Tov itself. So Mordechai told him, how can you do this? One of these days is going to be the first day of Pesach. Esther told him, Zakin should be Yisrael, sage amongst the Yidden. Zakin does not just mean old in years, but Zakin is a term used by Chazal as meaning a sage, a Talmud Chacham. Im ein Yisrael lamu Pesach. If there's no Yidden, then for what purpose is the Korban Pesach? Simply put, if we're not able to save our lives over this whole story, in other words, through fasting, through davening to Hashem, so for who's going to observe Pesach? So therefore, it's a situation, it's like an emergency situation where we will have to transgress and violate Pesach. Why? To save the Yidden, so they should be able to fulfill Pesach. Perhaps it's similar to what the Chazal say, Chalal of Shabbos Achas, Kadesh Yishma Shabbos Harbe. We say that you have to violate one Shabbos to be able to fulfill many Shabbosim when it comes to Pikuach Nefesh, Doicha Shabbos, when saving a life overrules Shabbos. But what do we see? An interesting thing. How did Esther address Mordechai? So it says in line 6, she called him by the name an elder, a sage of Yidden. Now, what does Zakin mean? As we know, the famous Maimer Chazal, that the Zakin, the word Zakin, can be like a combination of the words, a nutrikin, like the Chazal use the term, is someone that acquired wisdom. He acquired it, so he becomes like an owner of the Torah. And we actually see that Moshe Rabbeinu owned the Torah because he did overrule the Torah in this regard. Like it says that Mordechai passed. The simple meaning is that he passed the message all over that the Yidden should fast on this particular time. The Chazal darshan on the word Vayaver Mordechai, she'ovar al das, he transgressed the law about that a person is not allowed to fast on Yom Tov. So he all of a sudden became an owner of Torah, meaning he could decide what to do, even though if you open up the Shulchan Aruch, you open up the Torah, you see you're not allowed to fast. All of this is through the ascent, and specifically in the idea of davening. In other words, not anyone has the capability to be able to do this. Only when we have Ish Yehudi, only when you have the Idah of davening, only when davening has raised us up so high that we are completely bottled to the Eibishter, so then there is no fear that we are doing things contrary to Hashem's will and wishes, and we own the Torah, and we can make decisions that seemingly transgress the Torah. Just to put it in simple language, if every Tom, Dick, and Harry, or Reuven, Shimon, and Chaim is going to go ahead and say, I own the Torah and I can go ahead and transgress it as I wish, obviously, that's incorrect. But if a person is on a very high level, he's completely devoted to Hashem, and he's completely searching out to do Hashem's will, so he knows how and where to apply exceptions to the rule, etc. It's also similar to what it says about a Navi, that a Navi, you believe him if he tells you to transgress on a mitzvah in the Torah temporarily, but unless if a Navi tells you to be mevatla mitzvah totally, you don't believe him. But if he tells you for this particular time, like happened with Elyo and Hara Carmel, that they offered the carbon outside the Beis Hamikdash, etc., that was an exception that we learned out that a Navi can make an exception. But again, it wasn't because he was a Navi, because he was an elevated person. He was in a state where Hashem spoke through his mouth, so therefore he was able to do it. So this is the point that the Maimer is saying, that even though Moshe Rabbeinu is the head of the Sanhedrin and his ideas about Torah, but his elevation in Torah and his ascent in Torah is only because he was a Yehudi, because he had the Haidah, because he had the level of Tefillah. So it continues, line 11, V'zo ben Yor. That's what it means ben Yor. The Chazal explained, ben Sheheira name Shis Robert Philosophy. It's someone that illuminated the eyes of Yidden in his davening. Shedavka Idezeh. Sheheira name Shis Robert Philosophy. That only through the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu illuminated the eyes of the Yidden by his davening, Nitoisef Etzloi Gamba Hainyan de Yor was added to him also the idea of illumination that indicates intellect. In other words, Seichel is also connected with illumination. In the previous mimer, we learned about Ponim Meiros, the level of Chochmah is about the illuminated reasons or the illuminated face. Seichel illuminates. Torah is called Torah Oyer, the Torah of light. It offers illumination. So this idea goes hand in hand, both meanings in the same word. Yoyer from the word illuminating and davening, and that empowered him that he was able to illuminate with his intellect as well. Now, on the other hand, it goes both ways. It's in Torah, everything is in a circle. It's not just linear. The fact that he was able to illuminate the eyes of the Yidden through his davening, that there was an illumination in his davening, that came about. Torah enabled that. How is that so? So the Rebbe is going to bring an interesting example from something totally different. Chassidus brings down the whole time that Tshuva is higher than Torah, because Torah says you need to do this, and if you don't do this, you're in trouble. Comes Tshuva and says, no, you do Tshuva and you skaperloi. And it's a whole conversation that they ask Torah what should be the din of someone that transgressed on Torah, etc. So we see Tshuva is higher than Torah. On the other hand, how do we know about Tshuva? Only when we look in Torah. So Torah, even though Tshuva on the one hand is higher than Torah, that it can fix up things that were wrong in Torah. He messed up something in Torah, Tshuva can fix it. On the other hand, Torah is the one that reveals and draws down and tells us about Tshuva. So that's what he's going to bring an example concerning how Torah also illuminates the davening. He says in line 16, Valderach HaMavor bin Tshuva, similar to what's explained concerning Tshuva. Though Tshuva is higher than Torah, how do we see that's higher than Torah? Any type of deficiency, any type of lack that the person had in his Torah study, in his performance of mitzvahs, comes Tshuva and fills that lack and fills that negativity and repairs that. So obviously, to be able to repair something, you're coming from a higher place. Kol Mokum still in all this galus, miles Tshuva. Shagam onu yoidim zois, that the revelation of the advantage of Tshuva, that we also know about this, Ya'idei Torah, is only through Torah. V'zeu gama inyan chasisas reish b'nei Yisrael. That's also the idea that when you will raise up the heads, the b'nei Yisrael, that raising up, as we said before, that Mordechai was raised up. How? Even his head, even the intellect, his Torah, through davening. She says, that's the raising up and lifting up in the head. That's the idea of Torah. That's done through davening. So we have, like we said before, we have the davening raises up even the head, which is the idea of the intellect of Torah. On the other hand, it's also the other way, that how do we have the empowerment of davening? How do we know about it? Through Torah. So here is where he's going to connect now both things. We start off the Maimer with Kisisas Rosh B'nai Yisrael, and then we led into Purim, because this Shabbos is Shushan Purim. Shabbos Parsh Kisisas Shushan Purim. Oizvav, V'hinei. In the Chisisa Shayach Gamla Purim, this idea of raising up is connected also to Purim, partially because of the events that the Parsha talks about. Shari bit lagzer the Purim, nullifying the decree of Purim. After the Eden was in such a state and situation that their eyes was darkened like the bottom of a pot, It's through they prefaced their shkolim to before the shkolim of Haman. It says that Achashverosh hints at the word darkened. The word Achashverosh, the letters can be related to Hukshuru, that the Hukshuru means it became dark, that Yidden's face were dark, but how was that undone? Because the 10,000 shekel that Haman offered Achashverosh was preceded by the shkolim that the Yidden gave, the matzah shekel that they gave. Shezeu atoichin, the parshas, kisis shkolim, shas parshas kisis, on top of page base. That is the idea of the prefacing of the parshas shkolim. That's the begin. That's in the beginning of parshas kisisa. That is one connection, because the matzah shekel undid and counteracted and undermined what Haman offered at 10,000 shekel. Now, in addition to the fact that Parshas Kisisa has to do with Purim every single year, Bechlal, because usually it comes around this time, there's a special emphasis in the way Purim and Shushan Purim falls out this year. Cities that are surrounded by a wall, like for example, Yerushalayim, Koyrim b'Shabbos Parshas Tisa Kriya de Purim Vayovi Amalek Gomer. So then we read on Shabbos Parshas Kisisa the Torah reading of the Purim Vayovi Amalek. This is called a Purim Mishulish. I'm not going to go into it at length, but in Yerushalayim and wherever there is a walled city, Alpi Din Torah, which I'm not sure if there's anywhere else except for maybe Yericho, from the times of Yeshua ben Nun, we have what's called a Purim Mishulish. Ordinarily, Yerushalayim keeps Purim on the 15th of Adar, whereas we keep on the 14th of Adar. But when the 15th of Adar comes out on Shabbos, like this year, so there's different things that are done on different days of Purim. There's what we do on Friday, which is our Purim. Yerushalayim will do things on Friday, like Matanis Lavyonim and Shalach Manas. There are things that they will do on Shabbos, like the idea of the reading of the Torah. They'll read like on Purim Day. Vayove Amalek is what we read even by us on Purim Day on the 14th. So in Yerushalayim, where the real Purim is the 15th, they will read on Shabbos. Plus, they recite Alanissim on Shabbos. And then on Sunday is when they have Bikra Megillah, and they have the Sudas Purim, etc. If I remember correctly, the division of all these things. You can ask somebody that was in Yerushalayim for Purim. So, the point is that on Shabbos, when we're reading Parshas Kisisa, in Yerushalayim, they read about Amalek, Vayove Amalek. That has to do, that's the Kriyas HaTorah of Purim, because Haman was a descendant from Amalek. The Inyan Zeh, line 6, Kashu Gamash Kosu B'Haftorah the Shabbos Zohar. This is also connected to what's written in the Haftorah of Shabbos Parshas Zohar. Pakatis Shos Amalek. Last week's Haftorah, because it's Parshas Zohar, it says that Hashem told Shmuel Navi, I remembered what Amalek did. Shesham would Geshes HaMayla Shekabolos oil Haida. Over there, it's emphasized the advantage of Kabbalas oil, the idea of admitting and accepting and doing what you're supposed to do. Like it says in the Haftorah, Shmoya mizevach toiv. Listening is better than karbanis. Over there, it's talking about the whole story that happened with Shaul HaMelech, that he did not listen fully to Hashem's commands. He left the sheep alive to be able to offer karbanis, etc., etc. So Shmuel told him, as much as you think it's great to offer karbanis from the sheep that you took from Amalek, but listening to Hashem is more important than a carbon. So that is the idea of Kabbalas oil. So then he says, Mamshich, and the pasuk over there continues, V'gam netzach Yisrael lo yishaker lo yinochem. That it says that the everlasting one of the Eden, meaning it's another expression for Hashem, he will not lie and he will not change his mind, and therefore he has already decided that Shaul will not be king, and that's it. The Hadavar Yatsa Pi HaMelech. And therefore, therefore, once Hashem decided, so then the kingdom of Shaul was given to your fellow that is better than you. That is the idea of the kingship of the house of David. And David is an expression and a descendant of Yehuda. Yehuda shows again on the idea of Yehudi, Haidah, Bittul. So it's again Kabbalah's oil and Bittul, which is the idea of that brought about the miracle of Purim. In such a way that it says, my glory I will not give to anyone else. Meaning only the house of David will remain and will become, from that will come the Melech Mashiach's times. Mashiach David until the future redemption. That will be through Mashiach, that's from the house of David. So therefore, this is all about the level of Bittul. This is all about the level of Kabbalah soil. And how is that so? So again, we do this in a way of Bittul and Kabbalah soil. So he says in line 15, V'zoichem was that we merit this. We merit this through the acting in the way that Mordechai and Esther wanted, that we should act in it. Liyes Ish Yehudi, that we should be an Ish Yehudi. What does that mean, an Ish Yehudi? Shekayfer b'avodah zarah u'moide b'chol ha'torah kula. That we deny an avodah zarah and we admit in the entire Torah. In other words, it should be in the full force and the full strength. The Ish Yehudi, the Ish hu loshen toikif. The word Ish, specifically the term Ish, shows unstrength. Like it says, Ki Ish gvura, like a man, his strength. He has the strength and the power and the idea of admitting and accepting. The Rebbe, by many Farbrengens that I remember being by on Purim and the times leading up to Purim and so on, would speak about Mordechai lo yichre v'lo yishtachve, that Mordechai did not kneel and did not bow down. He had the full Ge'oin Yankiv, the full Toikiv, the full power to stand fast in his beliefs. And then why did Haman want to do what he did to everybody else? Because of Mordechai. So Mordechai he has a problem with, so let him take care of Mordechai. Why the whole nation? Because Mordechai recognized that every Yid is Am Mordechai, like it says in the Megillah. Every Yid has this innate power and strength and Haidah and Bittul to the Eibishter, and therefore he realized, it's not going to help to get rid of just Mordechai alone, and therefore he has to get rid of this whole Bittul to the Eibishter problem. So he says in line 20, V'zeu, Ish Yehudi hay b'Shushan Abira. That's what it means that Ish Yehudi was in Shushan Abira. Shagam b'Shushan Abira, yesh etzla ha'toikiv the Yehudi, also in Shushan Abira, there's the power and strength of Yehudi. Shekayfer b'avodah zarah u'moide b'chol ha'torah, that he denies avodah zarah and he admits the entire Torah. By days and nas mashakosu with Parshas Kisisa, and through that it occurs what it says in Parshas Kisisa, l'chaper al nafshesechem, that this becomes an atonement for your souls. Va'ad la'oifen achin naila v'kaporish, and the fell side de hatshuva k'mevur v'geres hatshuva, like until it's the highest level of kapara that happens through tshuva, like it's explained in Geres hatshuva. So it's the ultimate atonement. V'Yisrael loisen tshuva miyad in the golim, yidin do tshuva, and immediately they will be redeemed.